This is Joyce Hanson interviewing Stephen Mandoki for the Murrieta Oral History Project. Today is February 29th, 2008. Okay, let's start with how long were you in, or are you still in Murrieta?
No, I left there in October of '04.
Okay, and how long did you live there?
I never lived there.
Oh, okay. Well, tell me
I
about.
worked there from officially July 1, 1991 through October of 2004. I was hired on as the assistant to the city manager, and I actually came in June and helped him out, but since it wasn't a city yet, I just did that on my own. I was in between. I left my former position, so I had about a week or two, so I came down a couple of times and helped out the first city manager, Jack Smith.
Okay, so you were actually the second employee of the city.
I was employee number 2.
Okay, and then third.
My ID number.
Okay, and third city manager. Is
yeah,
that right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. So, well, tell me about some of those early days. What were some of the things that you and Jack had to deal with, and how to get things up and running, and essentially, how do you start a city?
It was a very unique experience, I can say that. So my first trip to Marietta was in March of '91, and when I remember going there, there was no one on that freeway. The freeway, I mean, I didn't see maybe 2 or 3 cars my whole drive down there. And of course today, the traffic's just a nightmare. But went down there. Jack Smith hired me on as the assistant too, and for the first year, we worked like crazy to hire positions. Mm-hmm. We had contractors on board that did our planning and our engineering functions for the city for the first, year roughly. Mm-hmm. With myself and Jack and a contract finance director, we pretty much ran the show with contractors for the first 6 months. We recruited for department heads, for a finance person to assist the contract finance director, and just did a whole bunch of recruitments that very first year, getting people on board to eventually replace all the contracting firms that we did have in place, the firms that were there that were helping the city from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Hired a police chief, he hired a lieutenant, and from there they hired a force, and we got a police department up and running, I believe it was August 1st, 1992. Mm-hmm. So after a year of cityhood, we had our own police department. In that first year, again, we hired a planning director, public works director, and slowly hired planners, engineers, clerical people. It was an incredible process. It was the days, it was rare to get out of there after maybe 10 or 12 hours, but it flew by because there's just so much to go on that first year.
Right. I talked to Jack on Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
And he gave me some of the information, but tell me about financial.
I'm not sure exactly what you want, so if I get too generic or broad, just tell me.
Okay, I will. But just tell me about the financial situation you had when you first started hiring. What were some of the issues that came up?
Initially, there really weren't any financial issues. We were always, trying to we had a rough idea of what our budget was, because being a very brand new city, we didn't have any historical records. Mm-hmm. So we had projections. There were projections that were done by the consultant who did the feasibility study for cityhood, and working off of those, we had a pretty good idea of what we had to work with. Mm-hmm. So that allowed us to hire the people we did. I think even to this day, the city is still understaffed. Mm-hmm. We always did a lot with very few people in Marietta, and I think to this day, I think that's still very true. Mm-hmm. Financially, I think a real setback for the city, or a real issue, was the fact that a mall was never built. Okay. When the consultant did the feasibility study back in, must have been 89, 90, there was plans for a hotel to go in on Hot Springs Road, and there was projections of a mall being built, and to this day, neither one of those things happened in the city. Yeah. 17 years later. Mm-hmm. But other things did happen, and every year we were able to bring on new police officers and add positions. Probably never to the level that we really needed, but we did. The employees did a great job and performed a great service. Then in I think it was late '92, '93, early '93. There were all the revenue projections due to the quote recession that we were going through.
Right.
And I say that because that word's used a lot, but who knows when it really happens. But some income revenues were going down, and the council decided to implement a salary reduction for employees. That was a rough time.
Yeah,
By hindsight, that should not have happened. I think we probably would have got through without it, but it was kind of sending a message to the community that that the council is very concerned, and it caused a lot of morale problems, particularly with the police department and other employees. I mean, it was not a pleasant period. And around the same time, revenues for the fire district began to diminish because they were utilizing a lot of development fees. And the city eventually stepped in and took over the Marietta County Marietta Fire Protection District. It had been a county district since 1947. And prior to cityhood, this fire district was the city. I mean, people needed things in Marietta, they went to the fire district.
Right.
And it was a hard thing to do. It was hard for the fire department to become part of the city, but I think ultimately it worked out for the best for everyone because, again, it was an excellent department. It is to this day, and while we went through some tough times in that transition and having to close the fire station down, we eventually got it back open, hired back the employees, and I think now they've even opened a fourth station in the city. So, but every year we always had a balanced budget. In year 2 of the city, I was promoted to the assistant city manager and oversaw finance and HR, and we never had a deficit budget. We never lived beyond our means, and the council was very prudent with the finances, and while we always wished we could do more, we did a lot with what we had, and we never ran any deficits.
Yeah, Jack was saying that the city council was actually very fiscally conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? They were. There may have been at times where maybe, where is this going to be used for? Let me tell you this interview. Let me ask you that.
Okay. Well,
to be honest, I'm learning how frank I should be with this.
Well, you could be as frank as you want because you're allowed to take out anything that you don't want to keep in there. So don't worry about that.
Jack said conservative. I think conservative is a good word, but I really always felt we were very realistic.
Okay.
We never counted a sales tax dollar until the store opened. We didn't try to live on what might happen next year.
Okay.
And in fact, we had one year where we counted on one thing and we didn't on another, and the thing we counted on did not open, and the store that we weren't expecting did open. And it was because the one, I even forget the one that didn't open. I forget the name of the store or what it was. It was a major retailer, but it was like such a sure thing. I mean, they were in there, they were doing the plans, everything, and then they had delays at the very last minute. And we never did it before, and as far as I know, the city never did it since, not while I was there.
Yeah.
And not with that council, because it was just, we never wanted to have a deficit.
Well, I think that's a good way to be. I mean,
it's the right. I think it's the right way to be. I mean, I treated this as my own money, and I wouldn't waste it, and I was careful with it, and and we just always made the best decision for the city when we planned and planned things. Right,
and I think that was Jack's point, is that they weren't afraid to spend money on salaries when necessary.
Oh no, not at all.
Right, but didn't want to depend on things that may or may not happen. So I think that was his main point when he said that, being more conservative rather than spending money that didn't exist yet on promises, basically.
Right, exactly.
Okay. So talking about that city council, who were some of the people? Now I've talked to some of these people, but give me your impressions of, say, David Hawes, who was on the first city council.
as a whole, that very first city council, I said to many people over the years that was like the purest city council you could ever have. In the sense that you had 5 individuals that were there because they were there 100% for the city. I never saw any personal agendas surface with those individuals. It was like all for one and one for all kind of thing. I mean, they were very cohesive group. They were there because they put a heck of a lot of time and effort into making that a city. And everything they did, they ate, slept, and breathed Murrieta. Not that the future councils don't, but I mean, it was just the brand. It was just such an excitement, and it was just a different point in time. And then, of course, we had an election not too long after that because of the way they structured the original incorporation, and then things changed, and the new council wanted their own city manager, and then there were changes there, and then other political changes, and city managers leave and come and go, and all kinds of other things happen.
Yep. I understand that. So tell me about,
Dave was a very good guy.
Yeah.
He had like a construction background. He took a big interest in the projects that were coming through, because as a new city, that's every city council, we met for the first year every Tuesday night. We didn't have meetings every other week, we had them every week. And Dave, as well as Fred Weishaupt, who was an engineer, were able to really go through and scrutinize plans and make sure that everything that was being done is being blessed by the staff and being brought forward was in the best interest of the city. As it always was, but their expertise just brought a little more to the process.
Right. Yeah, it was a very diverse council, right, as far as background and occupation?
Yeah, well, we had 2 firemen. And I'll never forget this quote. I don't know if you talked to him. Marv Curran, who was the fire chief at the time of the corporation.
Yes.
Someone said to him, and I don't know if this came out from anyone else, but I loved it. Someone said to him, and it kind of goes back to the fact that the district was a city, and they said to Marv, how come you got 2 firemen on the council? And he said, that's all we decided to run. So if they had run 5 firemen, you probably would have had 5 firemen on that city council that very first time. Because a great group of people.
Yeah.
Lived in the community, well known, and I just love that quote. I heard that. I've never forgotten it all these years.
That's a great one.
Yeah, Jerry was our first mayor, and Joe Perry, who I think was the second highest. No, I forget now. It was Joe or Gary. Joe was mayor pro tem, I believe. It's a long time ago. But the 2 firemen, again, just had the best interest of Marietta at heart, and then we had Gary Smith, the highway patrol officer. Again, as a group, just a fantastic group of people. Yeah,
everyone says that. They're really impressed with their dedication.
I think Gary's the only one who still lives in the city. Everyone else has left. It's not the Marietta it was in 1991.
No, it sure isn't.
And all of them will tell you that.
Yeah.
That's part of the reason they left.
So, tell me about some of the issues of building the city. What are the main big things that come up? I know Jack said the first thing had to do is put together a police force, and he talked about that.
Yeah, that was a major decision for the city. I mean, that was part of the reason the city became a city, was because law enforcement by the county was very, very lacking at the time. And it was a challenge. When we were going through our that financial issues in the early 90s with, property taxes going down and sales tax dropping, some of the attitudes that came out of the various departments, I think, created kind of a division between the departments. We didn't have enough staff in any of the departments, and there were some who felt that, other departments should be cut at the expense of the police department and one like that. And so having that does bring a unique, perspective to the operations, because you've got to have public safety, whether you contract for it or if you have it in-house.
Right.
I was always very proud that we had a department, but at the same time, I know it created issues for other employees in the other departments. But it's like that in any city that is full service.
Of course.
And then just bringing on the right people.
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, I think the way things have evolved to a department that's, I think, very well respected. It was from the beginning, but things change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to really say on that one.
Okay.
I think, I don't know if you talk to the former council members what they thought about it, if they do things differently today or not, or if they had to do over again.
Yeah, they didn't have too much to say about that, but
there's only much you can say,
Yeah, exactly. When things were changing, now Marietta was very rural. Prior to incorporation, when things were changing, did you notice any sort of how could I put this? Conflict between residents over what was changing in certain areas of the city?
Absolutely.
Okay. What are some of the things?
It's something, actually, I heard a story on NPR yesterday, kind of a very similar situation in a rural area that's being developed now. And it happened in Marietta, too. People would move into these beautiful, new, inexpensive tract homes next to an area that had been raising animals, or oh my gosh, I'm trying to think what else is near a nature preserve or something. Mm-hmm. And now they have bugs in the area. It's like people moved in and didn't really and kind of wanted to be where they came from, but yet, without all the things that used to be in Marietta. Mm. The high school was, for example, a good one that caused issues down the road. The high school was built and opened in 1991, I believe, or 90, mm-hmm. the first high school in Marietta. And then years later, people bought homes right next to the high school and then complained about the traffic. Well, there's traffic around every school in every city in this country, just about, and especially in populated areas. 8 o'clock, all the kids got to be there, so there's a lot of traffic. So people would move in and then just didn't like having what they came from, I think.
Right.
So, and that was just inevitable. And to this day, I was talking to the former public works director from Temecula just last night at another function, and he's been gone many years, probably 10, and just commenting how bad the traffic was then and still is today. And I think that's still the case for the valley, because the homes keep coming, and there's just no way to keep up with the number of automobiles. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, that's a major problem between Temecula and pretty much Elsinore for us.
Yeah, when I was still there, this was part of the county-wide task group that went ahead and we implemented a county-wide transportation fee to help improve the roads county-wide, and that's going to be a very slow process in terms of collecting the funds and doing the building, but it's an issue across all of western Riverside County, between Corona down to Temecula and over to Banning, Beaumont.
Yeah.
New homes, inexpensive, the prices, we move out there and you gotta commute.
Yeah.
No way around it.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people from Orange County moving into that area.
Yep. Oh, well, yep, they are.
Still are.
Yep, still are, still will.
Yeah.
You look at Orange County, you buy a 3-bedroom home for $500,000, or not even, if you're lucky, $500,000, or you can go to Corona and buy a 5-bedroom for about $350,000.
Right.
So it's probably cheaper the little farther out you go. But, yeah.
But then you have to commute.
Yep.
So, what kind of development plans were in place for Marietta? Was it planned development?
Yes and no. Mm-hmm. When we incorporated, there was like 24,000 people, and today there's over 90,000.
Right.
I think my impression back then in terms of plans is that there was a lot of property and a lot of people wanted to develop it because this was a time to make some money. Mm-hmm. And in fact, one of the biggest one was called the Vineyards back when we first incorporated. That's all I ever heard about was the Vineyards. And that finally did not build till like 13 years later, as an example. So, yes, there were plans, and obviously it's the timing of the market, and with things slowing down in 93 and taking time to come back up, things were kind of, hit and miss, and projects were built, and some were downsized, some were, delayed. But in terms of planning, the city had a general plan and all the proper zoning codes and so on, and everything was reviewed, and so developed in a very responsible manner. Okay. But it wasn't like in Irvine where the whole city was just like this master plan. I don't think any city's like Irvine, but no, it was developed very responsibly. Okay. And still is to this day. I know there's still areas that there's so much area still to develop.
Oh yes, there's still lots of open areas.
Yep.
So, what would you say are the most positive things that came out of incorporation and development in Marietta?
Well, what I saw was just a sense of pride for the community. Mm-hmm. Trying not to live in the shadow of Temecula. Uh-huh. I don't know if you've talked to any of the founding fathers or the founding group.
Give me your take on it.
But my take of what I heard, the history, the people that I talked to over the years was just, it was going to be one big city. And as the plans developed, Temecula's founding fathers had plans to dump all the industry and all the undesirable type uses into the Murrieta area. Uh-oh. The people in Marietta said, no, we're not going to let that happen. And so they, whatever process they used, petitioned to not be part of the incorporation of Temecula.
Okay.
And so they got together and did it on their own. Mm-hmm. And, 2 years apart, you had a second city down there. Mm.
So the big positive is they didn't have to be part of Temecula.
Well,
as far as some of the people are concerned, at least.
Back in the early 90s, it was a whole different population. Uh-huh. Back in the early 90s, you had mostly, I'd say probably half of those people had been living there for many years, mm-hmm. and the other half were living in Cal Oaks, which is a new community. But a good portion of the population were the longtime residents, and there was no mall, there wasn't anything in either city except mm-hmm. traffic. Early days, Temecula had traffic guards directing traffic over the bridges in their city because they didn't have the signals. When Marietta Incorporated, we had one traffic signal in the entire city. Oh. That was it. One signal at Cal Oaks and Los Alamos, I believe this is cross street. And by becoming their own city, they took control of their fate and decided upon the level of public safety they wanted. It allowed the city to eventually get a library in the city. For many years, the city was a donor in terms of there was a library tax collected on the property tax payments of every resident, mm-hmm. but that money went to the library in Temecula.
Oh, okay.
Of which everyone could use. Mm-hmm. And then there were plans to maybe build another library, and it was going to be in Temecula. Mm. And that was a major thing that I was involved with, was getting the funds separated. We had to go through legislation so the county would keep the money in Marietta, and we took that portion of the property tax money and we opened a library. We've got a temporary building. We hired a librarian, hired staff, got books, and then eventually took advantage of the state funds that allowed us to then build a regular, permanent library structure. Mm-hmm. So things like that would not have happened without cityhood. They may have happened in some respect, but even to this day, there's just such not more towards the new people, but the old-time people just don't always see eye to eye between the two cities. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, but by becoming, and Temecula to this day contracts for police protection and fire. Mm-hmm. I think Marietta, again, as being a full-service city, there's a lot of pride in having your own department, your own fire department, getting the library built, having just the services that the city does provide to all the residents. Okay. It's a very family-oriented and a very positive place to be. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there have been, I guess, a lot of efforts now to bring like the new people and the old people together.
That's since I've left. I've seen that when they've hired a marketing person and mm-hmm. trying to have community fairs and this and that. Mm-hmm. I really couldn't comment on that.
Right. Right.
I think more the so-called quote old timers, the original groups. I think a lot of them have been moving out because it's not the rural area that it used to be. Mm-hmm. It's to them it's LA again.
Right.
LA, I mean, the traffic, the freeway, all that stuff.
Right.
I mean, again, going back to the early days when I was there, I mean, I would hear the comments of when they wanted to shop, they had to drive to Corona for a supermarket, not even Lake Elsinore.
Wow.
They'd have to drive up to Corona and do the shopping, or when they would drive in from their work, they would stop in Corona, or they had to go down to Fallbrook or Escondido to shop. There wasn't anything in that area back, I think in, again, 91, there were 24,000, and if you go back about 3 years before that, there was like 8,000 people in Marietta.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the growth was just phenomenal.
Yes, it was. And everyone who was out there for all the ruralness and that peace and quiet, it vanished.
Right. Right. More people, more stuff.
Yeah. It was inevitable. It's a beautiful area.
Mm-hmm.
The freeways would allow the people for the development, and anyway.
Okay. Well, I think that's about all I have, Steve, unless there's anything else you want to add or...
No, I really didn't know what to expect or what to say, and but in terms of just the whole development, it was a great experience. I saw all the changes happen for 14 years, and I think for the most part, I think all the councils and the staff have just done a fantastic job with that city.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right.
All right, Steve. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye.